fourth session of the virtual lecture series, Digital Documentary Practices, Topical Paradigm Shifts in Negotiating the Real. And this fourth session will be a very special one. Not only is it the last one before the Christmas break, today we have also a guest who is always good for a surprise. On the one hand, this makes it the maximum easy for me to introduce him, as I could simply say, see for yourself. Here comes Florian. On the other hand, I have the feeling that this would not do justice to this creative mind and artist. However, what I can do is trying to contextualize Florian and his work and his perspectives above all within the spectrum of ideas that we have had so far in this lecture series. Kate Nash opened the field, sharing with us her reflections on the question how to situate emerging documentary practices within the documentary tradition, claiming that interactive documentary is both evolutionary and revolutionary. Judith Aston, our second guest, took up this idea and brought up considerations as to polyphony and metamodernism to better understand the potential of iDocs and also to underline why iDocs matter, especially in these days. Yasmin Kermanci then directed our attention to especially the affordances of iDocs as digital media and as to their procedural rhetorics to make complex issues experiential. And after this first recap of the presentation so far, introducing us to some theoretical considerations, as much as the potential of iDocs, we will probably broaden the spectrum once more. Florian Thalhofer, to finally come to our today's guest, will probably offer a completely unorthodox, but thus all the more so exciting and inspiring way to approach interactive nonfiction. And here I deliberately chose the word probably, because, as already mentioned, this whole event today is for me as much a surprise as it is for you. This brings us to Florian. As an artist, a documentary filmmaker, an academic, and the author of a highly inspiring blog, and as the inventor of Korsakow, which is a software to produce interactive documentaries. However, Florian is not only the inventor of some software, he has given a great gift to community of documentary makers, media artists, and scholars, as Korsakow has even generated a subcategory of iDocs. This is the case because Korsakow is a very special kind of tool. It is a software, a tool to create interactive nonlinear documentary film, but it is also a tool for thought, a methodology. In an interview with Judith Aston and Stefano Oderico for the special issue of Alphaville on polyphony, Florian stated that storytelling is a tool. You use it to express your thoughts, and at the same time, it alters your thinking. As Florian points out in almost all his talks, Korsakow is a principle which heavily influences how one sees the world. And I presume, yes, presume, that this is what Florian will invite us to do today. See matters in interactive documentary differently. On his website, one can find a very nice sentence, which also perfectly fits into what Judith Aston has brought up in the discussion last week with the concept of polyphony. On the website, Florian writes, "People often think that I mean what I say. Really, what I mean is that what I say could be important in the chorus with all other things said." One can see that Florian seems to be intrigued by the idea to probe into complexity without pressing it into taxonomic boxes, into neatly scripted stories with a nice, predictable, linear three-act drama. Florian thinks outside boxes. And hence, he is also today, I guess, speaking not so much from the perspective of an academic, though he certainly is one, having recently started his practice-based PhD, supervised by Judith Aston, Florian Krautkremer, and Michael Hohl, and as he is also a member of a research project that is based at the Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts. No, Florian will probably be speaking, above all, from the perspective of an artist.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. Just recently I started to work in a research group at HSLU in Luzern that looks at interactive documentary. And I started a practice-based PhD with Judith Aston, who had a talk here in this lecture series 1 month ago, where she introduced us to the concept of metamodernism. I'm super happy that Judith pointed us to this term that I was not aware of before. I feel like this term describes me and all the things I'm fascinated with and have been fascinated with for quite a while. It is a true privilege to be here to share my thoughts, to get your attention. I'm very happy to be able to focus on thinking and reflecting the thing that is so dear to my heart, the thing that has many names. It is called iDocs, interactive documentary, or more specific, Korsakow, or from a wider angle, documentary. I will talk to you as an artist, not as a scholar. This allows me to talk about what I see, not about what has been tested and confirmed by other people in the field, but what I see and what I am able to describe. So please check what I say, not only with your perspective, but also with what the kids say. The kids on YouTube or TikTok, or your kids at home. What I say often seems to make more sense retrospectively, but the disadvantage of looking at things in retrospective is that you have to wait for the future to arrive first, to be able to look back, and that takes time. I like to look into the future, so how do I do that? How do I look into the future? Well, in general, there are different strategies. People are usually somewhere between two extremes. On the one side, there are people that have, or imagine that they have, a precise understanding of the past. They know in which order things happen and why they happen. This is then what they see when they look into the future. The other extreme is a flexible understanding of the past. And in both cases, the difference is not to which level past events are understood. The better past events are understood, the better in any case. Both strategies are valid. I tend to the later strategy. My brain works like that. Recently I discovered that I might have aphantasia, the inability to create realistic mental images in my mind. An online test suggests that I'm in a group smaller than 5% of the population. It is said that people with aphantasia seem to live more in the present, and I can relate to that. So in general, I focus less on the past and take my attention more to the present, and from that perspective I look in the direction of the future. I hope this makes sense. This talk is a meditation about the change of two important pairs of terms as a consequence of the increasing use and the literacy of using digital documentary media. It is the relation of author-audience and the way we look at documentary media as a tool, especially tools like YouTube or Korsakow. YouTube has a lot of similarities with Korsakow, as a growing number of people are making use of YouTube in particular ways that I want to describe. I will look at that in relation to my own experiences with Korsakow. I hope that these ideas are helpful to the concept of metamodernism that Judith Ashton introduced us to. I was asked to make sure to link what I say to documentary. Here we have a collection of filmic documentary formats. It's not a complete list. We have anthropological film, documentary film, news, YouTube, and also fiction film. If these formats were planets, this could be the solar system of filmic documentary. All the planets spin around the center, and that center is reality, however one would define reality. Reality itself is hot and messy and dangerously confusing. It is impossible to see reality from within reality. The only way to look at it is from a distance. The closest that we can get to reality with the tool of the camera is raw material. Everything that is taken from reality and is recorded. This is the closest that we can get to reality by filming it, but of course what is filmed is far from being reality itself. Nevertheless, planet raw material is still quite confusing. From planet anthropological film you already get more overview, but you still get quite a bit of heat from the reality. Planet documentary and planet news are cooler and more comfortable. And then we reach planet YouTube, and further in space there is planet Hollywood. So also fiction film is getting its light from reality. There is no such thing as a purely fictional film that has nothing to do with reality. Completely fictional characters usually walk on legs, have eyes and ears. Why? Because even complete fabrications of fantasy, let's say in a film playing in a distant future on a different planet, featuring different life forms, take their inspiration from what we take as our reality. Because we are blind for any reality that is not related to our reality. Fiction films are just another tool, another angle to look at reality, just from a further distance. All that, in my mind, is documentary. All that reflects reality. It is just closer or further away from it. The distance to reality is not fixed. It can change. Over the last couple of years, YouTube, in my observation, went closer to reality. And when I speak of YouTube, I mean the YouTube that I see when I log into YouTube. Because YouTube is very different from each individual that logs in. There is a sophisticated algorithm behind it, maybe some kind of artificial intelligence that you train every time you use it. And I trained my YouTube quite a bit over the last couple of years. I have been working in the field of interactive documentary since 1996. The first digital piece of work that I made is what I consider to be my most relevant piece, except maybe from coming up with a software called Korsakow. Korsakow is of course a very different thing, as it is not a piece. Korsakow is a software, a tool to make things. Small World is a thing, a piece made with other tools. Small World could have been made with Korsakow, but Korsakow did not yet exist in 1996. Small World is the first of many documentaries I made, many interactive documentaries. It describes in 54 little stories what it is like to grow up in a place big enough to think that it is the center of the universe and too small to realize that it is not. Small World talks about what it is like to grow up in a small town, what it was like for me. Small World became my treasure box, a collection of meaningful fragments that still allow me to find new patterns that are relevant to better understand the present, my life 25 years later. Small World was the first time I made an artistic digital documentary project. And the first time I used writing as a tool to analyze and not as a tool to express. I had no idea what story I wanted to tell. I was just curious to find out, to collect meaningful artifacts of what it meant to grow up the way I grew up. And with this mindset, I started and I approached the place where I spent the first 21 years of my life. I collected fragments and put them in a box. I put the shiniest memories in a box and put the box on a shelf. And every now and then I go to the shelf and I open the box and I look inside. And whenever I do this, I usually find new insights, new patterns. Crazy, it is crazy. It is wonderful, and this is what happens when you create a meaningful collection of things that are dear to your heart, and when you resist the temptation to tell a story. Just recently I realized that quite intensely when I was talking to Bharat, a fellow student of mine from India. Growing up in a small town came up as a topic in our conversation, and I sent him a link to Small World, and I said if you're blessed with a PC you might still be able to see it because it doesn't work on Macs anymore. Bharat had a PC and looked at it and came back with two innocent questions. Questions that no one had ever asked, questions that allowed me to look at those fragments from the past from an angle I had never looked at before. Bharat intuitively asked the right questions and certainly could not have foreseen that I had discussed them with my wife for hours that night. What is a documentary? A documentary is like a little container that a documentary maker uses to put bits and pieces from the reality into it. So you put this reality into the container, and then you close the container and you can pass it on to another person. And that other person might be in the future. And that person opens the container and can see the things from the past. So what you try as a documentary maker is that you try to be as accurate as you can. So you try to falsify as little as you can. So a documentary is a container, and that means that there are certain things that you can put into the container and other things just don't fit. So the container in itself defines what you can deliver into the future.
First time I enjoyed a record session.
So what is Korsakow? To describe Korsakow for the last 10 years, I usually showed the following clip. And sorry for everyone in the audience who has seen this clip for the 15th time. But just imagine you are me.
First time I enjoyed a record session.
This is a SNU, the smallest narrative unit. Usually a SNU is a video sequence. A SNU has POCs. POCs are points of contact. There are in POCs and out POCs. Through an out POC, a SNU connects to other SNUs by connecting to another SNU's in POC. Many SNUs can connect to a single POC, and every SNU can have many POCs. POCs are created by keywords. An in keyword to create an in POC, and an out keyword to create an out POC. A Korsakow film is a collection of connected SNUs.
First time I enjoyed a record session.
The graphic designer in me, the guy who made drawings and paintings when he was younger, Franziska Weidele made that guy really happy when she chose a screenshot of this clip as the cover for her book. It was a dream of mine that one day a drawing of mine would make it onto a book cover. That dream came true. I just had to do a little detour, but I finally got there. I had to develop Korsakow first. And I could not have done that on my own. I got a lot of support from people like Joachim Sauter, Willem Veldhoven, Matt Zohr, Dave Risch, students of mine, and all the people that participated in one of the many workshops that we did, among them Kat Zizek in one of the first. All these people helped to create and understand how to use Korsakow. And then something happened. Korsakow got into my mind. It started to change my thinking, the way I direct the focus of my attention. Sometimes it feels like a brain defect. Every now and then I see that reflected in the way other people look at me, like I'm a bit crazy. The word for crazy in German is verrückt, which translates to a little differently placed, which could explain why I usually see things from a slightly different perspective, or even from different perspectives, one after the other, like in a film. And sometimes I can see these perspectives, these different perspectives simultaneously when I look back at a situation. And very, very, very occasionally my brain can do that stunt even in the moment. Oh man, that sounds like being on drugs, you might think, and you're right. It actually feels like being on drugs, just like without the being on drugs part. The clarity without the fog, so to speak. I would like to point to something some YouTubers are able to experience, and I once made this experience myself. One of the many videos that I put on YouTube went viral. It was a video that we originally filmed for Kodonaut, a Korsakow film on AI. I did this film together with Stefan Westphal and Felix Pauschinger. This interview with Richard David Precht we also put on YouTube. Precht is a popular German philosopher and he is often on TV in Germany. He might not be the brightest philosopher who has ever been alive throughout history, but hey, he is pretty smart. Certainly smarter than most people. But you would not have guessed that when you read the comments that came in. Most of them were really mean. If you upload something on YouTube, you can set the settings so that you can see all the comments and can decide if they should be visible. So I read all the comments and filtered them. Most of the comments were noise, but I received hundreds of comments and maybe one or two were really fantastic. Fantastic, like they could change your life, that kind of fantastic. Enlightening comments are really rare, very rare. The trick is to not get distracted by the noise. People are often afraid that they get mean comments because they might not conform to the norm or something. And it is true, there are these mean comments. Most comments are mean, maybe 90% are just mean. This leaves us with 10% that are either useless or maybe nice and friendly and good for the ego, which you might need sometime when you need healing or support. If a comment is mean, it is most likely written by an idiot, and you are well advised to just ignore it, which of course is easier said than done. The other comments you might want to ignore are the nice comments, the healing ones. Medicine that is good for healing might not be healthy for you when you are being well already. That is why you don't take painkillers when you are not in pain, right? Interesting are the comments, the ones that add to what you put out there, that add a perspective that you were not able to see before someone pointed you to that perspective. Some of these comments can be truly enlightening, and they can come from anyone. Don't focus on the noise. If you look at the noise, that is what you will see. Instead, look for the signal. And if you learn how to look for it, you can see it everywhere. If you're not afraid anymore of making yourself vulnerable because you fear the comments, you can share traumatic experiences. Let me introduce you to Truthless, one of the two examples that I would like to show today.
I want to tell a story that starts when I was in year 7. I was 12 years old and I really loved drawing. Specifically, I loved drawing portraits, just people's faces, front on, 3/4 profiles, the whole lot. Even back then, I think I was a pretty obsessive kid, so I had this A5 book that had 140 pages in it, and it was my mission to fill every single one of those pages with a portrait. Just somebody's face, a face that I'd made up, not really drawing anyone in particular, more just drawing face after face after face. I really loved the eyes, the eyebrows, the way that the eyebrow curved into the nose, the way jawlines looked. I was just obsessive. Anyway, I get to the end of this book. I've got 140 portraits in there, and like any 12-year-old, I want validation for my creative efforts. But I don't really know who to get that validation from. Then it hits me. My art teacher at the time. I'm going to show him all these portraits I've done, and you know what he's going to say? He's going to say, "You're amazing, kid. I can't believe a 12-year-old did this. This is freaking magical, and you should never give up." That's what he's going to tell me. So art class, it's on a Friday, and I've made this commitment, I've made this decision on the Monday. So I've got to wait like 4 days with this art book just burning a hole in my backpack. We get to the art class, we get all the way through it. Finally, we get to the end of the class, and there's my moment. I walk to the front of the class, he's there, all the other students have left, and I say, "Hey."
You can probably guess how the story goes on.
I've drawn some portraits. Can I show you the portraits? And I pull out my book and I start flicking through these faces that I've drawn, and I'm suddenly struck with self-consciousness. Like, what's he going to say? Is he going to tell me they're amazing? Is he going to tell me they're shit? Is he going to tell me that I need to work harder? Or is he going to tell me to keep going? Like, I don't know. It's the first time that I've really felt that kind of pressure. And you know what he did say? He shrugged. Then he said, "I have to go." He had to go. He was probably late for something, looking back. But my 12-year-old brain didn't take it that way.
Truthless is not afraid to make himself vulnerable. He speaks openly and honestly about the things that happened to him in a lot of videos that I have seen from him. This makes him successful in the sense that he gathers an audience, not a silent audience, but an audience that provides feedback.
My reaction was to not draw for 10 years.
Watch this, Lise. You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now.
Serious YouTubers and podcasters often talk about the feedback they get and how they learn from it. But it also can be difficult sometimes, as this video shows that Truthless uploaded to YouTube 1.5 years later.
I am an author. Life is amazing. Look at me. Am I not smiling with my 10-year-old self who said he'd one day write a book?
Then I got this one DM, and it was so small, and I don't usually get affected by nasty DMs, but this one really got me. I just restoried a bunch of people storying my book, and this guy replied saying, "Bro, stop reposting your book. It's the quickest way to lose followers." It was 18 months of trying at this one project, and I could finally celebrate it with the world, and this guy just assumed that all I wanted was social media followers, not for people to like my book. And usually I have good systems in place to ignore that, but on this one day I didn't. And so here's what my October looked like. I slept a lot, I complained a lot, my days got a bit shorter, I didn't really make much art, I deleted all my social media apps, I didn't make much money. I think I did one commercial job that month. I posted next to nothing. Every time I saw people post my book, I didn't reshare it. I sort of stopped celebrating that. I felt this sensation like I'd put so much of me into one project that I just had nothing left to give after that, that it was all there and I was done. I'm like, all right,
That's everything I have to say about anything, and goodbye. Goodbye. I will fade into obscurity now and never bother anybody again. And that just kind of perpetuated all of those negative feelings.
In Korsakow, I also experienced the magic of feedback. I experienced what comments feel like when we did a series of Korsakow shows in a theater in Munich over a period of 2 years. I did these shows together with the author of books, Tobias Hülswit.
At the center of a Korsakow show is a Korsakow film. With laser pointers, the audience collectively votes which clip is shown next. Left and right of the stage are two experts seated who can ask to speak when they feel inspired by what they have seen in the film. After an expert has pressed a button, he or she is selectable by the audience. The audience now has the choice of rather another clip or the voice of an expert. Whenever the expert has been chosen, he or she gets 2.5 minutes of speaking time and can say whatever lies on his or her heart. During the show, the audience also has the ability to send text or Twitter messages. These messages are then displayed on the side. Bolder members of the public can also come forward and press a button to stand for election. If the member of the audience is selected, he or she gets speaking time, just like the experts before him or her. The audience takes on the role of the presenter.
First time I enjoyed a record session.
There are many aspects of how feedback in a Korsakow show works, but just a few examples. What felt embarrassing first was, once we overcame the fear of useless negative feedback, a great relief. You do not have to consider everything. The audience fills in when something is forgotten. For example, we made a show on the topic of love and relationships. For this show, we had interviewed 2 people prior to the show, but both of them were heterosexual. In this show, someone from the audience stood up and he was clearly upset. He said that we missed to have some homosexual people in the show. And he complained to the experts that were on stage. One of the experts said, like, okay, if you want to say something that you feel like it is missing, then why don't you say something now? And then the person talked about the thing from his perspective, and that was a great moment. The audience also fills in when it comes to sense making. So we learned to become more and more brave and offered more and more dispersed content. And we used the Korsakow show as a thinking process. So together with the audience, we could think about a topic. It was not us who made the thinking and then presented it to the audience, but it was us with the audience thinking about something. This is Rezo, a young German YouTuber that became a public figure around about 2 years ago. Here he thanks the people that have sent him best wishes after he posted on Instagram that he had gotten sick with COVID. Rezo got sick with COVID and posted a few lines on Instagram where he said that he got sick but he's already feeling better. He's a public figure in Germany and that set off an avalanche of newspaper articles. Here he describes what usually happens when print media turns its attention on him. Newspaper bubbles emerge. Rezo explains in a few words different kinds of bubbles and says that these newspaper bubbles are much more toxic than other kind of bubbles that we know from other online media. He describes a pattern that after newspapers write about him, all these people come online and post all these mean stuff. He is able to talk in simple and precise words about it. He certainly experiences the situation he describes from the inside, but he is also able to look at it from the outside. This is pretty cool. If you have ever tried that, this is pretty cool. He is inside himself, talks about how he feels. The next moment he is able to look at himself from the outside. Then he describes how he is perceived from certain perspectives. In other videos he also explains what the reason is that, for example, TV or newspaper journalists talk about him the way they do, even if they got it all wrong. And all that without moralizing or blaming. And I will get back to the point, but first, how does he do that? There are two basic concepts how to understand the world. The first concept is based on the idea that there is one way to look at things, and this one way is the only true way. There is one right viewpoint from where you can see the truth, and this truth is the truth for everybody. Let's call this concept monoperspective. The second concept is based on the idea that there are multiple ways to look at things and that all these are meaningful. There is not one true way. In a sense, that means that all views are true, or better, to not get confused with the word truth, all views are relevant to collectively form a better understanding for what is out there. Reality is what individuals agree on, what is shared between them. That means that the individual viewpoints have to be constantly exchanged and discussed to get and sustain the shared reality. Let's call this multi-perspective. A lot of communication has to take place. It is necessary in order to agree on a shared reality. The better the communication tools, the more multi-perspectival societies became. The better the communication, the more views can be considered to build a shared reality. So there are these two concepts to understand the world. There's monoperspective and there's multi-perspective. But people are usually not one or the other. They are usually both to a certain degree. Very rarely people are in one extreme, either monoperspectival or multi-perspectival. Most people are somewhere on the scale between one and the other, somewhere between -10 and +10 on the scale of perspective.
He had to go. He was probably late for something, looking back.
He had to go. He was probably late for something. When Struthless talks about what has happened to him, that traumatic experience with his teacher, he does not blame him. He even finds an explanation to excuse him. He had to go. He was probably late for something. And that is very typical. And pretty much for all the others that are in this category. No moral judgment. There is a strong focus on what is and how to navigate what is, and not if something is good or bad. Why someone is acting good or bad. The changes that are suggested relate to oneself, not to others. There is no moral outrage. It is as if these YouTubers are all ideal Buddhists, people that do not blame, do not judge. There is no black versus white narration, no binary worldview. This is very multi-perspectival. Of course, I ask myself the question if I find these people because I train the YouTube algorithm to find them, but I don't know if this question is even important. YouTube as a mirror of my inner state of mind, even that would be very interesting. Monoperspectival thinking might still be a popular way of thinking, but it is not a successful strategy to find solutions for the hyper-complex problems that we are increasingly facing. People like Rezo are not a niche. Rezo's first public appearance on national stage in Germany was 2.5 years ago. when at the age of 26 he posted a video on YouTube where he talked about politics in a similar fashion prior to the elections of the European Parliament. The video was seen by 12 million people. Germany has a population of 82 million people, and it is said that it changed the outcome of the election by a couple of percentage points. It certainly had an influence on my vote. Media is a mirror that we built, a mirror that shows us. To produce contents with the incentive to give an audience what they need or what their audience wants to see is a strategy to build distortion mirrors. I understand that this is what may have been necessary in the past, but I firmly believe that this is not what we need in the future. This is not what we need in the future. The cost of having distortion mirrors everywhere can be felt at the time we are in right now. The costs can be counted in the number of lives lost at places where vaccines are widely available. I guess this is a learning we will take in one way or the other into the future. The way to build a better mirror is to take our attention away from what the audience wants or needs and put it instead of ourselves. Who is the author of the YouTube experience? The authors on YouTube that create their content? The authors of YouTube, the people who came up with the platform? The programmers who built it? The people who decided on its algorithm? Or is this just the infrastructure? But could you think of one without the other? Looking at Truthless or Rezo on YouTube, and looking in the archives and looking at the older videos, noticing how they developed over time, it seems obvious how much their thinking has been shaped by YouTube. I feel there is a lot of similarity with my own experience with Korsakow. I am the creator of Korsakow and I am the creation of Korsakow. So where is the author? Where is the author of this event? Is it Anavil? Is it Zoom, the company that invented the software that we are using? Is it the universities that we are associated with? Is it you who makes sense of the words that you hear through the speakers of your computer? The one who makes sense of what you see on your computer screen? Or when you lift your gaze and look out of the window? Is the author me? Is it all the people from which I got all the ideas that are in my head? Is it the people from which all the ideas came that went into Anna's head? Or is it the people from which all the ideas came that went into the head of the people that made the software Zoom? Or is it the people who came up with the words we are using? Where do you start? Where do you start the story? To define a source where all that began, to set an author, to me feels arbitrary, like a random set starting point. Where is the author? It would be bold to say that I'm the author of my thoughts. I did enough hours of meditation to know that this cannot be true. Where do you start? Where do you start the story? Who is the author? Who is the audience? We committed ourselves a long time ago to the concept that there is an author. We agreed that there is an author of everything and anything. The concept helped us to explain the world in general as well as in the details. We have built a complex model of explanation based on the idea of an author. We are currently finding out that the models we developed based on this concept are in fact under-complex. This would at least help to explain the confusion the world is in right now. Am I the author of my words? We are about to reach a level of understanding of the complexity of things that we cannot say that anymore. There is no author. Or as my meditation teacher Sam Harris, that I have never met and that talks to me through an app on my phone, puts it, there is no there. Complex systems don't have an author. It is not that the author is dead or something. There is no author, and there has never been one. For the first time in human history, it is realistic that billions of brains can be connected to a collaborative thinking process. This needs an enormous amount of communication. We are currently developing these tools and are in the process of learning how to use them. My friend sociologist Davor Löffler told me that he estimates that it will take just 1 or 2 more generations. At least this is what his calculations show. Thank you very much for your attention.